Welcome back to Fade to Chat, Golden Age Cinema, the podcast where we revisit films from Hollywood's golden age and explore why they continue to resonate today. I'm Marty, and as always, I'm joined by co-host Cindy Rotz. Together, we explore the films, performances, creative histories, and cultural contexts that shaped classic cinema. Okay, so this was my suggestion. After I saw it on TCM a few weeks back, I had seen this film before and was looking for a palate cleanser with everything that's going on in the world and something that I knew that I could trust. And so I suggested The Awful Truth from 1937. Now, the title makes it sound like a terrible film, but it's got Irene Dunne, Cary Grant, Ralph Bellamy, and then some supporting actors, which is the best that I would say. But most important, the supporting actor is Mr. Smith, the dog, played by Skippy, who is also the dog in, where is Skippy also the dog in, Cindy?
Bringing Up Baby.
Bringing Up Baby. I'm not sure that, did they go through multiple Skippies?
I don't know that. You would think they would, but I don't know that for sure. He was also in The Thin Man?
Was in the Thin Man
I read
series
that
as
back.
Asta.
Yeah.
And they did have multiple dogs in Asta because the Thin Man series stretched over many years.
Yeah, I was going to say you'd have to, just like Lassie. There were
I think it was like
Lassie.
15 years that the series stretched. And Skippy was not always the easiest actor to work with, from what I understand. If Skippy didn't want to do something, they're not going to get something done. But God bless Skippy. He was the stand-in dog for everything. Okay, so I suggested this film. I kind of baited you because it had Cary Grant in it. And I know you're a Cary Grant fan. I don't think you had seen it before this. What did you think?
It's funny, Marty. When I first started to watch it, I thought, no, I've never seen this before. And it wasn't until I got to the very end of the movie. You know how certain parts you think, well, that's familiar. And I won't say what the end of the movie is, but when they got to the very, very final scene, I thought, now I know I've seen that before.
Yeah.
And I thought, have I seen that in another movie? But I knew exactly what was happening in that scene. But yet the rest of the movie was very unfamiliar to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Has that scene been played out before somewhere that I've seen it? The
If you're
clock
talking
is what
about
I'm
the
referring
clock,
to. The clock, yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it has.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
It's
what
weird.
was
It's
your
like deja vu.
what was your enjoyment of the movie like?
Well, um, I'm glad you suggested. I say that. I've said that with almost every movie. There's only one I didn't love. We won't speak about that again. um, Irene Dunne is just fantastic.
Yeah.
And I realized I had seen her before, and I went back and looked it up. And her voice, oh my gosh, her singing, which I know we'll talk about. She was in Anna. She played Anna in The King of Siam. And that was a beautiful movie. And I had just watched this one, which I had forgotten about. She was in Life with Father with William
Really?
Powell, and she sang in that movie also. Yeah, I had just watched that a few weeks ago, so that was interesting. And I didn't realize, sometimes these actors are singing in the movies, and I thought, wow, what a gorgeous voice. And I thought, is that really her? And it is really her. She was a trained opera singer. In fact, they said she had a range of 3 octaves, I
Hmm.
believe. Yeah, I looked that up. But the thing
It,
I find interesting about Cary Grant, other than the fact that he's just very nice to look at, he plays he's been in so many movies with so many different leading women, and they always click. There's always, you always think, oh yeah, they're perfect together. It doesn't matter who it is, whether it's um, Irene Dunne or it's Katharine Hepburn or it's Audrey Hepburn, or yeah, it just doesn't matter who it is. He always has that connection with them, and I think this one was particularly good.
Yeah, they paired well together.
Mm-hmm.
Irene Dunne and Cary Grant. In fact, well, a little bit more about Irene Dunne. You're right. She was classically trained. She went to the Met and auditioned for the Met Opera, and they basically said, well, you're too small, you're
Yeah.
too frail, you don't,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't really say anything bad about her singing. They just said, your body shape and projection does not fit what we need. And she got frustrated and said, okay. And
Mm-hmm.
she did some stuff on Broadway, which is where you see some of her dancing chops, I think. And there's actually some pretty good dancing in this film.
True.
And she, you see the writers using her skill, her singing skills throughout the movies that she's in. So it doesn't surprise
Mm-hmm.
me the movies that you mentioned that I didn't know or forgot that she was in, that she was, they kind of put her forward and said, let's look at your, let's use your singing in some. It's like having a Marx Brothers film and not having Harpo play the harp or Chico play the piano.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting to see her in this position doing the work that she did with Cary Grant. And Cary Grant described her as being the best comedian he ever worked with.
Mm-hmm.
He came to this movie not wanting to be in it.
Yep.
He wanted something to kind of build his reputation, and he thought that his reputation was fading. And I think the studio said, "You're going to do this film." It was directed by Leo McCarey. Leo McCarey has some infamous history with, infamous in a good sense, history with films. So if we think back to 1933, 4 years before this, he directed Duck Soup, which was one of the
Mm-hmm.
films that we covered in our show. He also did Make Way for Tomorrow in 1937, The Awful Truth in 1937, Going My Way in 1944, The Bells of St. Mary in 1945, and then a film that we talked about or alluded to when we talk about Cary Grant is An Affair to Remember, which was more of a drama. Ironically, we have talked about that film. I've seen it before, and it came on last week, and I was had some work to do and like to have something going, and I threw it on, and it's an interesting film, Affair to Remember from 1957. And then Love Affair from 1939, Once Upon a Honeymoon in 1942, and Ruggles of Red Gap. He did lots of shorts early on in his career, so he has like 160 IMDb directorial
Wow.
notices about his history. But a lot of them, when I scrolled back to try and find things that were significant films, he started off doing a lot of shorts. But yeah, his first kind of big old breakthrough film, I think, would have been the Marx Brothers and Duck Soup. So they
We
paired
might
up
need to
well.
talk more about that one.
Yeah,
No.
they paired up well.
Mm-mm.
I think there is an issue. Uh, Cary Grant also did not like his style at all. He his style was, let's let actors contribute and let's improvise and let's not necessarily feel the need to have full scripts ready for people to memorize. Let's let them work the area. And it drove Cary Grant nuts for a while until he got into the
Yeah.
process and began to enjoy it. And I think that helped his ability to do comedy in the future. This is seen as one of the first rom-coms that was out there, which was another, and particularly in this style that was produced. And so Leo McCarey gets a lot of credit for that. Any other thoughts with Irene Dunne?
Well, she was such a slight woman. You mentioned that with her in the opera. She was such
Yeah.
a petite, very, very thin woman. And for her to have that amount of vocal range, I thought was very interesting. Because
Yeah.
usually when you think of someone being able to project and sing like that, you think of a much larger stature woman, so to speak. But she made it look effortless. And then
Yeah.
the dancing too. And I know we'll talk about that. The dancing, she's a beautiful dancer, which I had never seen her dance in the other movies. Well, maybe in the King one, I'm not sure, but I hadn't remembered that one. But no, I just thought she was a beautiful actress to watch, and and her comedic timing. I mean, it just seemed like she was enjoying the movie. She and
Yeah.
Cary Grant both. It was almost like there was this constant, like, almost you could feel it kind of welling up inside her. Like she could kind of almost not even hold it in sometimes. The little, kind of
Yeah.
things she was doing. And Cary Grant the same way. That they just really enjoyed being together and enjoyed doing that film. And there were quite a few scenes where that was obvious.
Yeah. I enjoyed a lot of the nonverbals.
Mm-hmm.
While someone was saying something. I mean, we'll talk about some of our favorite lines.
Yeah.
But when someone was saying something watching the other actors react. And there's
Yeah.
one
It
big
was.
scene that we can talk about,
Mm-hmm.
Gone with the Wind. We can talk about that
Yeah.
scene and
Yeah.
those actors, and
Yeah.
that the reactions are precious. I mean, particularly
Precious.
Cary Grant's.
I agree.
He thought this film would fail in production, and he tried to leave it in
Mm-hmm.
production. And he, again, I think, put in some of his best performance that I've seen out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me, he's trained as a younger as an acrobat, and he had
Mm-hmm.
acrobatic training. So I can understand the preciseness of knowing what's going to happen next. But this felt probably like him, like being a trapeze artist without a net, that he had to kind of trust what was going to happen on the set and with the folks. Runtime is 91 minutes. It's not a long film. You want to talk a little bit about Ralph Bellamy?
Yes. I didn't recognize him at first. I knew the name and I thought Ralph Bellamy. I kept watching him. And then I realized I had seen him before in Trading Places.
Yep.
Yeah, a much older Ralph Bellamy in Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. He played Duke.
One of the Duke
And
brothers.
yeah, one of the Duke brothers. And that was another really good movie. Yeah, he again, I don't care for the it was almost like a character of a southern gentleman. It was a little bit exaggerated for me.
Mm-hmm.
The drawl and the ma'am and the coming from Oklahoma and
Yeah, he was
yeah,
like an Oklahoma
and
mama's boy.
yeah, living with his mom, and I didn't care for that part as much, but and you knew that she would never wind up with him.
Yeah.
And she was never going to move to Oklahoma and leave New York. And of course, Cary Grant played that up, pretty well too. Said, "Oh yeah,
The
Lucy, when you get tired of Oklahoma City, you can go to Tulsa,
so
things like that." And you just knew, he was just sticking it to her, and you knew that was never going to happen.
yeah, Ralph Bellamy got the least from what I read. He got the least prepared for this film. They basically said,
Mm.
"Show up,
Mm.
and this is your role." If you don't recognize Ralph Bellamy by anything, you recognize him by his voice. He has that distinct kind of voice. Now he southernizes it and kind of makes it sing-songy, but you can
Yeah.
definitely tell it's Ralph Bellamy, and maybe that's part of the connection. It's like, oh yeah, I remember him as one of the Duke brothers, because he has that same voice over all the years in his career. You might not remember his name, but you'll remember his voice and what he looks like. It's like, yeah, I've seen him in things before.
Mm-hmm.
He was the only one this was the only movie that he ever got an Academy Award nomination.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't win. Irene Dunne got a nomination but did not win. Leo McCarey got a nomination for director and won. And I looked at the films from the 1938 Oscars, and there wasn't a lot going on there. I think I forget. Spencer Tracy won for Captain's Courageous. Charles Boyer, who we had seen before in Gaslight, was nominated for a leading role as Best Actor, but Spencer Tracy won it. Charles Boyer was Conquest. Frederick March, A Star is Born. Robert Montgomery, Night Must Fall. And Paul Muni, Life of Emily Zola. Winner for Best Supporting Actor over Ralph Bellamy was Joseph Schindlerkraut, The Life of Emily Zola. Roland Young for Topper, which we've mentioned or we've talked about before. Roland Young did not win Best Actor or Best Supporting Actor. Best Actress over Irene Dunne was Lucy Warriner for The Good Earth. Familiar with that movie, but she won consecutive roles for first for actress, the first actress and first performer to win consecutive awards for lead roles. And so, Irene Dunne had, I think, won a Oscar a couple of years back for a role that she started, that she was in, that kind of led and raised her level of on the Hollywood platform. It's sad she didn't get it for here. Greta Garbo nominated for Camille, and she lost on that. Barbara Stanwyck and Stella Dallas, she lost on Best Actress in a Leading Role. So, yeah, it was only from the Oscars. It was only Leo McCarey that took something away.
I just watched, just on another side note, I just watched Barbara Stanwyck again. Of course, we had just seen her in
Double
Double
Indemnity.
Indemnity. I just watched Sorry, Wrong Number.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who directed that.
I hadn't seen that in ages, and it popped up. I thought, oh, I'm going to watch that again.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you, Marty, but again, murder. We're on a murder theme here. And I thought I got to get off that theme for a while. That's why we're doing this one.
The film influenced decades of romantic and marital comedies. You really could sense that this couple was married in this film, Cary Grant and Irene Dunne. And it was sort of like the kind of couple I would like to be around.
Yeah.
And I think, that showed a little bit of healthiness, not because I'd like to be around them, but that they knew each other so well. They could play a foible for each other in a lot of ways in that.
I know I always say this, but there were no wedding bands. Cary Grant's left finger was noticeably absent of a wedding band. I noticed that in the beginning of the movie when he was at the health club and he was getting his tan because he hadn't actually been in Florida like he said he was. And so he had to get his fake tan. There was no wedding band on his finger. And I don't believe she had any on hers as well, which I thought was unusual because sometimes it's the opposite. In the last movie, Fred McMurray played a single man, but yet he had a wedding band on. And this time they were playing a married couple, and there was none.
You know, that you mentioned the tan, and that triggered me. In black and white, that makeup did not work well at all.
No.
And I'm sure, when the makeup artist's putting it on, they're not thinking about the final print. And I watched essentially the Criteria Collection version of it. And it just did not, it was just that side of blackface. And and then the tan disappeared later on in the movie, which was
Yeah.
kind of nice because it was just horrible.
Yeah. But yet in his other movies, like To Catch a Thief and, well, most of his other movies, he is always very tan.
Yeah.
And they said that he would do that because he didn't want to get all that makeup put on, that he would naturally get tan so he could avoid a lot of that. But yeah, he was very pale in the beginning, which I thought was unusual because normally you see him with a natural tan. But
Yeah,
this one
he
was
was
just,
meticulous about his looks, which is
mm,
another thing. His dress, his
mm,
looks, the style.
sure.
And because he knew that was something that was part of his trademark and part of his attraction. And when you see
Hmm.
Cary Grant, you're not going to see him disheveled or in lousy clothes, unless he's out in the middle of a cornfield. And he still looks good out in the
Yes.
middle of a cornfield in
Yeah.
North by Northwest. Um,
Or or in Father Goose.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Father
Father Goose.
Goose.
Yeah, he's still Cary Grant, even if he
Oh,
doesn't
I know he
shave.
is. Yeah, I know.
Okay, so do we want to uh, let's work through a little bit of the plot from what I can remember without giving
Okay,
spoilers.
sure.
Cary Grant comes back from what he says he's been on a trip, and they he claims that he was in Florida, shows up at the men's club, puts himself under the sun lamp for as much as he can to get tan, goes to his house for a reception because he's back home. He's got this fresh tan and brings a fruit basket of fruit. And he starts to get immediately jealous because his wife has been off and did not come back last night because she was off with her music tutor.
Mhm.
And so the banter between him, the music tutor, and the wife, the kind of jealousy erupts. The wife then discovers, well, she knew all the time. She's like, "You've got this tan, and it rained all week in Florida, so
Yeah.
help me with that." And she pretty much figures out. We don't really know where he went.
Mm-mm.
We never find out where he went.
No, no.
So this fight leads to a scene in court. I tried to find as many stills of this as I can, and I put some of them in when we talk. So if you're watching the video version of this, you'll shift to what stills that I have. And couldn't find anything from the court scene.
Hmm.
And so why don't you talk a little bit about the court and who gets the dog?
Yeah, who gets the dog? That was the most important part because there's no children involved. And back to the beginning where they are arguing, one of the subtle things was he picked up her mail and he said, "Oh, I wrote you letters every day." and here's letters from yesterday or the day before. They're unopened. So where have you been? And as you said, he brings her this beautiful fruit basket, and she takes one of the oranges, and it has the word Florida stamped on it. So she realizes too. I mean, no, it didn't say
California.
Florida. California,
California.
thank you. So she realized, this was, something he just picked up at the grocery store. And so they go back and forth and have this argument. And she says she's going to file for divorce. And they end up in a courtroom. In the beginning of the courtroom scene, the dog got kicked out. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The dog got kicked out because I guess he was interfering with the proceedings. Then they bring him back in, and there's this big hullabaloo about, well, who's going to get Mr. Smith? And she says, well, he's my dog. And he says, no, he's my dog. And then she tells the court the whole story of how she got the dog. And he says, well, let's the dog, just like a child, we'll let the dog decide who he wants to go with. And she's carrying this little
It's
little
like a muff. Yeah.
a muff. I used to
Hand
have
muff.
one of those as a little girl, which
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, how else would you do that? She has this little muff with her hands in it, and they both go up in front of the judge, and they unleash the dog, and let's see who the dog's going to go to. And they're both calling the dog, come here, Mr. Smith, and they're clapping their hands and patting their legs, and the dog's looking back and forth and back and forth, can't decide who he wants to go to. Then all of a sudden, she has this little toy, like little squeaker toy, that she had. Did Cary Grant bring that for him in the
There is a
beginning?
story that I read that Cary Grant brought like a mouse with him.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then in the
Put it
movie,
in
she
his.
winds up with this little, like in his pocket, and she winds up
Yeah,
with something in her muff. So I don't,
I think he
I don't know.
brought that in the beginning of the movie. I think he brought that toy for the dog.
Ah, okay.
Anyway, this little squeaky toy, and she just subtly, kind of moves her hand out with this little toy in it. Of course, the dog comes running to her, and she ends up getting the dog because of that.
And
And
I think
then,
he tries to protest. He's like, "But judge, do you see what she?" And he's like, "I'm not going to have any more of this."
yeah, and then he gets visitation rights. He can see the dog once a week or something silly like that. The first time he shows up at her apartment, she's like, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Well, it's my week. It's my day to come visit, Skippy, or Mr. Smith, they call him in the movie.
Yeah,
His
and
day,
Ralph
just like a
Bellamy's there.
child, but it's his day to visit the dog."
Yeah, Ralph Bellamy's in the apartment because they get introduced by her
Aunt
mother,
Patsy. No, Aunt
Aunt
Patsy.
Patsy. Yeah,
Hmm.
and Ralph Bellamy comes in and they're having this conversation and they decide, oh, you need to go out. We're going to take you out. So he shows up for visitation and just does all this marvelous disruptive stuff like playing the piano and having the dog sing while they're trying to have a conversation.
Yeah,
It's there's so much fun
so
in this
much.
movie that
Hmm.
there are little nuances. You're not going to laugh at everything, but you're going to enjoy the pace of this film and everything
Yeah,
that's done, which is these subtle digs back and forth between the couple, who is obviously still attached to each other.
right. Very much so.
Can we jump to the nightclub scene?
Oh, yes.
All right, so let's not just forget the nightclub scene without Lulu Bell or
I think it was
Dixie Belle Lee is her name.
Dixie
The
Belle.
actress
Hmm.
is Joyce Compton, and she had a long life, 1907 to 1997, and she appeared in 160 different credits. She kind of moved
Wow.
into television post movies and was, kind of a bit player in a variety of television shows. But the big scene is he's there with Dixie Belle Lee, and they're having a drink together. And then who comes in but Irene Dunne and Ralph Bellamy?
Mhm.
And so they could very well sit at a separate table and do their stuff, but instead they come over and they're like, oh, well, you're going to invite us over for a drink, right? And so they sit down and they start to have a conversation. And Dixie Belle Lee's like, oh, you're to Ralph Bellamy. Oh, or he says to her, oh, you're Southern. I can tell by that voice. And, they start to have their conversation. And then she says, I have to get ready for my act. I work here. And they're like, oh, really? And I'm going to be singing. Which is pretty amazing and pretty much a lot of fun. She winds up doing a song about how her dreams have gone with the wind, that she dreamed about this and she dreamed about that, but her dreams have gone with the wind. And whenever she says that line, wind blows her skirt up.
Right.
And it's kind of, you realize that the song is all just about being salacious and showing her legs.
Yeah.
And then you have Cary Grant with Irene Dunne and Ralph Bellamy watching this. And Cary Grant is just kind of, oh my God.
I
And
can't
Ralph
believe it.
Bellamy's kind of enjoying it. He's like, even says, this will go out really well in the West. And
And
so,
Irene Dunne loves it, that he's embarrassed.
oh, and
She's smirking. She's like, this is great.
I couldn't
I'm
find a good
sorry.
still shot of his eye rolls or his like,
Uh,
he does these little things like, ooh,
yeah, like,
huh?
oh,
He does these kind of these gestures and movements, and it's like this guy is uncomfortable, and then he's
yeah.
trying to just kind of in his mind brush it off. So yeah, that's the scene, and it gets replayed later on in the film.
Yeah.
And when do they do their dance scene? Is it in
Right
this
after that.
nightclub? Oh,
Yes,
okay.
because one of the things I wanted to add when he's so embarrassed and his wife is looking at him like, "What are you doing with this woman?" He said, "Well, I just met her." That's his reaction. I just met her. Like I just picked her up. Uh, but Daniel says that he's a very good dancer.
Yeah.
And one a part of the conversation, he says, "Well, I'm a really good dancer." So he said, "But Lucy always says she doesn't want to dance." And Cary Grant says, "Oh, no, that's not true. She's an excellent dancer." So he eggs the two of them on, and they go out to the dance floor. And the first dance is just fine. It's a waltz. And it's nice and smooth, and they're waltzing across the floor. And the song finishes, and they're coming back up to their seats. And all of a sudden, the orchestra plays a really, I'll call it a jazzy number. I forget what it kind of actual music it was. But he's like, "Oh, this is my kind of music." And he takes her back out to the dance floor. And now it's her turn to be embarrassed because this is not what she's used to doing. It's like a flapper, almost like a flapper
Yeah.
style kind of dance. And he's just having a great time. And they cut over to Cary Grant. He's like, hmm. He kind of was like, "Oh, what's this?" And he gets just a little smile on his face. And then he kind of sits up in his chair like, "Ooh, I'm going to watch this. This is really good." And she looks back at him and she's now mortified. She's so embarrassed, like, "Get me off this dance floor." And as the music continues, Cary Grant actually takes his chair and moves or gets up to another chair. I forget
To
which it
get a
is.
better view.
But he gets up closer. He gets right up as close as he can to the dance floor. And he sits up real straight and he's like, "Oh boy, I'm going to enjoy this show." And he crosses his legs like, "I'm getting ready. I'm getting settled." And she is just mortified. And finally, the song ends, and you can tell she's just relieved, like, get me off this dance floor. But in the meantime, Cary Grant goes like this to the waiter, and he gives him some money. And he says, you tell that orchestra leader to play that song again as an encore. So as soon as she finishes the dance with Daniel and starts to come back up to their chairs, they play it again and they have to go out and do it again. And so Cary Grant, he kind of gets his revenge. It's like, okay, I'm going to get you back for that. And he just smiles, and you can just tell he is loving the heck out of that.
And
Oh,
you know
I
the
thought that was one of the greatest.
the
Yes.
difficulty in that is, first of all, you see Ralph Bellamy. He knows how to dance. At least he knows
Yeah.
how to dance this way. I mean, well
Yeah.
done, well choreographed. He obviously has had practiced or had some training in that process. And she has to play someone, no matter how good her actual acting skills are, dancing skills are. She has to kind of be someone who missteps here and there. There's a scene where she actually gets kicked by Ralph Bellamy, or
Yeah.
there's a portion where she has to lift her leg and she's holding her
Yeah.
leg and keeping the
Yeah.
rhythm by hopping.
Yeah.
It's quite a scene, quite an interesting, and you can imagine from Cary Grant's point of view, he's just taking this all in, and it's like, I've got
Hmm.
you, I've
Yeah.
got you.
Well, and the rest of the dancers, they just kind of back up. It's not
Yeah,
like they're dancing even in a crowd. They're the only two dancing because everyone else just kind of clears the dance floor and everyone's watching them.
yeah, and
Oh,
so they're kind of showcasing
yeah.
that in terms of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And you're right. Then
So
she later, we
yeah,
see a similar scene later where she plays his sister, and we'll talk about that.
yeah, we get to see a bit of her. Cary Grant is jealous, and he realizes he's jealous because
Hmm.
she's hanging out with her music instructor, voice instructor,
Hmm.
and she has like a, I don't know what you would call it, a a I'm sure there's a term for it, and I've lost my memory of it, but a gathering of friends where she's going to sing in front of her friends,
A
and
recital.
a recital. Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
And you get to see her true talent as a
Hmm.
singer with in this. This is where they give an opportunity for her to showcase her operatic skills. I, I I should get my daughter to watch this scene at least if I can find it for her, because again she teaches legitimate opera, and
Hmm.
I always like to get her opinion on singers,
Hmm.
if she'll give them to me, and if she'll look at the piece. Sometimes I'll say, "What is this person singing?" and she will tell me what opera it's from or from what the piece is with it. So there are some scenes that are connected to operatic music. And I know probably more opera than most men my age. Um, and having raised a daughter who, not that I listened to opera as much, but that I was listening to a lot of her opera performances. And as a college student, I went with people to go see operas together and friends who were very much into it. So I'm always curious about that. I'm always curious about the skills of the people who are doing the singing, having a daughter who teaches that. So I would be curious about that. But she's doing this recital, and Cary Grant is all nervous and winds up breaking into the recital after a confrontation of someone who is sort of like a waiter, but a guard, but trying to restrict
Yeah.
people from coming in there while she's doing it. And he's rather embarrassed by that.
That was another good scene. I thought, he sat on that single chair. He looked very uncomfortable even just sitting on that chair, almost reminded me of like a student in school. You're sitting, he was just like kind of sitting with his hands on his lap. And then, just like a kid in school, he starts to lean back. And before you know it, he falls off the chair and everything breaks. And he's grabbing for the table. And that was another thing I watched that a couple of times. As he's grabbing for the table, I don't know if you noticed, everything kind of broke apart and the drawer falls out of the table, falls
Mm-hmm.
onto the floor. And then they show him trying to get himself together, and she's still singing. She's like, "Okay, what's going on back there?" And just a little bit of a smile again on her face because it's like, "Oh, that's my husband." Um, he's trying to get himself together and collect himself and get back up onto the chair. The drawer that had fallen out on the floor is now back in the table, and then he pulls it back out again. So that was a bit of a goof. I don't know if you caught that.
Yeah, yeah. I yeah. There are continuity. There are some continuity issues with
Oh,
the film, as all films. And
yeah.
McCary's style was, let's minimalize this. Let's try and take as few. The film came in like 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is because McCary's style of shooting and directorial pieces was, let's get it in one take, two takes if we have to do it. We're going to get the best out of you when you improvise, and
Mm-hmm.
the more we do it, the worse your production becomes, your acting becomes. I kind of I believe that. I think first and second takes are probably the best you're going to get out of an actor. I did a little stage stuff when I was younger, and it always felt like in rehearsal that the best piece was the stuff that came fresh. So I get that style, but it's very effective for the studio. You look at some directors that were noted for, Kubrick, for example, was noted for extensive takes. And then he would search through all of them and find the one that he wanted, not necessarily the best. And some directors work that way, but it slows down the process and I think really takes the feel out of the actor. And then you have to go to the next day and you've got a scene where you're in for at least 20, 25, 30 takes before you can move on to the next part of the story. So,
I think one of the most notable scenes was the piano scene, where you
yeah,
talk about spontaneity. That wasn't planned at all.
when he sits down at the piano and starts playing with the dog.
No, when Ralph Bellamy is singing "Home on the Range."
Arrange. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't rehearsed at all. And he apparently couldn't. Well, he couldn't sing. He couldn't sing at all. And Irene Dunne was playing the piano, and he went in, and she said, "Well, can you?" Or I guess the director asked him, "Can you sing?" He's like, "No, I can't sing a note." He said, "Well, just give it a try." And he's horrible. Sings his "Home on the Range," and she tries. She starts to sing along with him, and she tries to kind of get him back into somewhat of a, decent tune. And there's no doing that. And he looks at her and he says, "Well, have you ever had a lesson?" And she went, "Yes." I thought that was kind of a subtle, like,
Yeah.
"Yes, I've had
I've
some
never had a
lessons."
lesson. Have you ever had a
Yeah,
lesson?
yeah.
and
But
and it's like he plays it for sincerity, that he really believes he's a good singer. Although he just told the director, I'm a terrible singer." So he knew something about
yeah,
what the director was asking him to do, to be a bad singer, but because of his ego and because of who he was, to pretend like he thought he was a good singer.
yeah,
Can we
yeah.
go? I'm looking at the flow of the show, the time, and there are
Mhm.
a couple of other pieces yet to talk about. The scene with Cary Grant starts to go out. He thinks things are really serious with Ralph Bellamy and with Irene Dunne, and Cary Grant
Mhm.
starts to spend time with a socialite.
Mm-hmm.
played by Molly Lamont, and the socialite was Barbara Vance. And and I tried to look for other roles that she was in. I confused her with another actress. And so she was in some roles, but he's going out to have, I guess, a meeting with his what is going to be assumed his fiance, his new fiance is going to be, and her parents and her relatives. And the scene where Irene Dunne is getting dressed up and he's getting ready to go, and
Oh.
they you just had a reaction to that. So go ahead and say what that
Well,
reaction was.
that was very touching. They were, it was the countdown, like hours till their divorce was going to be finalized. And she said, let's have a toast. And she was reminiscing about, I guess, on their honeymoon and everything that they had done. And you could tell there was a sadness in that scene. That was the first time I felt sadness from her. Like she really thought she was losing him, that they were going to go through
Hmm.
with the divorce. And then she said, well, I'm going to call a car, I'm going to leave, and you go on with whatever you're going to do. And she goes to the phone and calls for a car to come pick her up. And then the next second, literally, the phone rings and she picks it back up, and it's Cary Grant's girlfriend, fiance. And then she realizes that, maybe I can do something with this, because she's jealous. And she's like, who is this? Who is this? And she
Hmm.
said, oh, no, I'm sorry. And she hands the phone to Cary Grant. And he said, well, what are you doing answering my phone anyway? And then he makes up this lie that she's really his sister. And um, she doesn't believe that. She said, well, your sister, what's your sister doing there? And he tries to, he's fumbling along, trying to, make her believe that, oh, that's just my sister, and I'll call you back. And in the meantime, Irene Dunn's talking to him, saying, what's she doing calling you? Why is she calling you back? And don't let her talk to you that way, and put your foot down and stand up to her. And she's talking to him in the background, and he's trying to talk to Barbara Vance on the phone, trying to get her off the phone. Hangs up. Phone rings again. And again, Irene Dunn answers the phone. She said, oops, I did it again. And I
Yeah.
thought, yep, you did that again on purpose. And then again, that creates more conflict between Cary Grant and his fiance. And she gets madder and madder. And I think maybe that's when Irene Dunn comes up with that crazy idea to actually pose as his sister, and shows up in that next scene at the home.
Yeah, and Irene Dunne is dressed
Oh,
to look a little bit like Joyce Compton,
yeah,
as best as she could. Her hair is kind
yeah,
of poofied out. She's got that kind of makeup and face, and I got a still shot of that. And there's a first of all, there's so many great lines during that
hmm,
scene, like you're uh, uh, okay, nobody move. Where's my purse? And then they point out that she had been sitting on her purse. There's a whole sort of slapstick thing with her holding a handkerchief, and then the mother
hmm,
sitting down on the handkerchief, and the
hmm,
mother getting up, and then them both sitting down
yeah,
again, and she's sitting on her own handkerchief. And it's
yeah,
just that kind of weird. She
yeah.
creates such a presence. My favorite line during that part is somebody says, "Would you like a drink?" She goes, "I've had 3 or 4, but they're starting to wear off." Uh,
Yes.
and she, there are little lines like that through the film that I can appreciate. So she decides that when they say, "What do you do?" and she goes, "Well, I got this little show I'm in,
Mhm.
and do you have any record?" And she pretends like she tries to describe it. And she goes, "Oh, do you have any records?" And she's like, "Yeah." Little things like she gives her a record, she opens up the record player, and she says, "Oh, you're going to have to do this. The one we have at home, all you got to do is crank,"
Right.
meaning it's a very, very old Victrola.
Hmm.
So she starts to do "My
Hmm.
Dreams Were Gone with the Wind."
Yep.
And I don't know if you have more to say about that.
Well, I she's impersonating, of course, Dixie Belle, and at first Cary Grant is annoyed with her, and then he realizes what she's doing, and he
Yeah,
kind of he gets that little smirk again, like, oh, okay, Then he
yeah,
kind of is like, oh, all right, I get what she's doing. And again, I read that she wasn't familiar with that type of dance, and she was supposed to do this. They call it a burlesque bump in the
yeah,
middle. And she told the director, she said, well, I can't do that. He said, well, just say that. So in the middle of the dance, she gets to that part where she's supposed to do it, and she says, oh, never could do that. And then she just goes on with the dance.
yeah,
So
yeah.
again, that was he just lets her improvise that instead of forcing her to learn how to do it. He says, well, just say never could do that, and it just becomes part of her bit.
Yeah,
And
and she says, "Okay, so imagine wind blowing my skirt up at this point."
oh yeah, that's right. Imagine, yeah, yeah. And of course, his fiance is just horrified, and her parents are like, "What is this? Who is this person? What are you marrying into?" And she really wasn't drinking because when what did they offer her? Sherry, and she said, "Oh, I don't like sherry." So she got up and she went over to the butler, or whoever was going to
Yeah,
get her a drink, and she says, "Give me ginger ale." And then she goes like this, like, "Give me a big ginger ale." So she pretends the whole time that she's been drinking,
yeah, and
and that's also
she
how she,
pounds that down. She just takes
yeah,
it in one gulp, takes it all down, and
yeah,
to kind of get people
and
to think that she's just a heavy drinker. And she refers to Jerry the Nipper.
Jerry the
Uh,
Nipper.
yeah,
Yeah,
that Cary
that was
Grant
in
is a,
Bringing Up Baby too. Remember?
really
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Katharine Hepburn referred to Cary Grant as Jerry the Nipper
Huh.
in that movie. Hmm.
So
Yeah,
they do this scene. Uh, Cary Grant decides she's in no shape to drive home.
right.
So they wind up, Cary Grant winds up trying to take them home. And instead, she's enjoying the heck out of this drive.
Oh
And
yeah.
there's a point where they say, "This is beautiful." And he's like, "Yeah, this is really kind of nice. Despite what happened, it's really kind of nice." And then police officers find them because they probably suspect that he's speeding at the time, and they pull him over. And the radio is busted, and the
Yeah,
radio
because she
is make
pulled the thing out.
she pulled the knob out and threw it
Mm,
out the car before
mm.
they left. And they attempt to fix it, and finally, by lifting the hood, because there was no way to turn it off, they were going to deal with the electricals. And she had done this previously when they had the problem, and she threw the knob out. Was she while people had their heads under the hood, she'd hit the horn.
Porn.
And if you watch that scene carefully, she's sliding across the seat, and Cary Grant says, "Oh no, you don't."
Uh-huh.
And she turns around and sits on the horn,
Does it
and
anyway.
hits the
Yeah.
horn anyways. So they cannot figure out uh, how to get the thing fixed, and they say, "Well, we'll shut it off, and we will deal with it in the morning. There's a lodge where my aunt is, and we can go there and stay there for the night." They get the police officers. I don't know how they managed to do that, to drive them on their motorcycles. They had
Yes.
two motorcycles, to drive them to the lodge and find a room.
Can I go back for a
Yeah,
second?
go back.
She does one more thing though that really fixes it. She releases the brake from the car,
Oh, yeah.
and the car rolls down the road and kind of smashes into the trees. So they can't drive that car.
Yeah.
So the policemen have to take them on their motorcycles. So she did that
Well,
on purpose so that they wouldn't be able to drive.
they wind up
And then
getting
each of
escorted
an
to the
escort.
lodge. Yeah.
Yeah, and she sits on the one, Cary Grant sits on the other, and she does the same thing on the motorcycle. She bounces up and down, makes that siren go, and says, she's like, wee! She's like a little girl. I mean, she just had such a ball with that. And you're right, how in the world did they get the police to ever do that? She said, well, you could give us a ride, couldn't you? And they're like, I guess we could. So I thought that was great. She just kept bouncing up and down, making that siren go.
Yeah. Um, and then probably the final scene. And I'll let you talk a little bit about the final scene. I've got some stills.
All right, so they get her to her aunt's cabin, lodge, and there's a gentleman there, and the police go in and say to him, don't say anything to him. Tell us who these people are. And the guy says, well, that's Lucy and that's Jerry. And he says, oh, okay, so you know them. So it's okay, they can stay there. And her aunt isn't there. Her aunt isn't there, but her clothes are there. So they get ready for bed. And Cary Grant puts on this ridiculous nightshirt, this big long striped yeah, nightshirt that he's wearing, and he has white socks on. He looks ridiculous. And I love there's just one subtle thing that he did. I don't know if you'll remember this. When she opens the door and she has on her Aunt Patsy's night clothes, which are way too big for her, and she wraps it around, tripping over it, and they open the door between their two bedrooms. Cary Grant does that pose where he stands up on one leg and goes like almost like ta-da, and she laughed. I thought that was kind of a whether he ad-libbed that or not, I don't know. I thought that was funny. So they're in these separate bedrooms. And by the way, that door between the two of them, there's no lock on that door. They make it seem
Really?
like there's a lock on the door, but there isn't. And it's a very windy night, and the door keeps rattling and rattling and rattling and rattling. By the way, there's a cat in the movie too, which we forgot to mention. There's a black cat on her bed. When she first comes in, she shoos it off the bed. Um, and so the door rattles and rattles and rattles and rattles. And he comes over and opens it, and he says, well, we got to fix this because this is going to be a problem all night long. And she's like, oh, okay, all right.
Well,
And he does,
although there's no visible lock on it, where you'd
mm-mm.
think there'd be a latch or something you'd turn on the door, there were those doorknobs that you could push in and turn, and it would force
Oh,
from one side it would force it to lock.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So who
Maybe
knows?
that was it.
The problem, even if it was locked, the looseness of that door would have rattled anyways. Locking it wouldn't have solved the
Yeah.
problem.
Well, and then he opens his window, and he purposely opens his window, and all that air, all that wind is rushing through. So now the door is really rattling, rattling, rattling. And at one point, um, he goes over and he thinks, why isn't that door opening? He thinks it should just blow open
Yeah.
because he's obviously created all this air. Well, there's that cat sitting on the other side of the door. And she looks over from her bed. She's like, that's why the door is shut because that darn cat is blocking it. So she gets up and, shoos that cat away. And then he realizes that, oh, okay, the cat was blocking the door. And
You
they
know,
keep
with
showing the clock. The clock started at 11:15
yeah,
when they first got there. It was 11:15. These little figures, not a cuckoo clock, but these little figures, a little man and a little woman come out of each door and they do like a little dance and then they go back into their separate doors each time. And I did my best to see because I thought that little male figure in particular looked like a little miniature Cary Grant.
Uh,
I don't know, but I just thought it looked like him. And just that little hop, little hop dance that they did. Then they turned around, went back into their little doors, and then they come out 15 minutes later.
so, yeah, I did manage to find a close up of the clock. And I think the way they shot this, obviously, they didn't have little tiny people walking in and out or a really big, large clock that they shot it from. This looks like this was kind of a shot with 2 live actors, full size, done on a screen, and then that was added in to the position of where the clock was. But it has a man's side and a woman's side. And what I read about the clock piece was Leo McCarey did not know how to end this film. I mean, he knew he wanted them to be reunited, but code would prevent them from like hopping into the same bed, even though they were still technically married. Remember, they had till midnight to make a decision about whether they wanted this decree to go through. So it was a crew member that said, hey, why don't you do this? And the crew member came up with the clock montage. So every time you see these scenes of indecisions or the scene of, I'm going to open the window because I can't sleep and because I want to try and get her attention, they would cut back to the clock and show the characters come out and then go back in. But this final scene, why don't you talk about him coming in and his sense of wanting to talk about apology and what that means.
Right, because you're right. The clock, they showed it every 15 minutes. And I wrote down at 11:30, they talked about kind of almost like their regrets. You could tell both of them were feeling like, are we doing the right thing? That, maybe you really didn't do what I thought you did. There was never any real accusations of cheating. It was always just, I'm not really sure where you were. I'm not really sure what you were doing. But there was never anything decisive in that respect. That was always kind of ambiguous. But the final scene, it was 11:45. That's when he had opened the window and you could tell, I think he was getting a little desperate because he knew time was ticking down. And he's talking to her and it was almost as if they had gone back and talked about what had happened in the very beginning and how they had lost faith in their marriage. And they didn't come right out and say it, but you could tell they both had regrets and that they both wanted their marriage to work. And so without saying anything, then the clock, it's 11:45 and these 2 little figures come out. And this time, instead of them going into their respective little homes, the male figure comes out and goes around and follows the female figure back into her little door, and the door closes. And this time, he closes the bedroom door that was separating their 2 rooms. And this time, he takes a chair and he puts that chair right up under the door handle so that that door won't open again. And that's the final scene. And you realize that the 2 of them have reunited at the last minute. And as you said, without showing them actually in the bed together, you realize that they have reunited. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah. It's a fun film. It's one of those things I think I could, I'd be hard pressed to recommend to, like Double Indemnity. I thought this is kind of a timeless film that the story could be given to someone, a younger generation to look at, they'd still find the movie interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I had been watching, or should I say, I finished watching yesterday, all in one day. I binge watched Seven Dials, the Seven Dials Murders, which is on Netflix right now, and is a Agatha Christie story. And really enjoyed it because sometimes I see Agatha Christie stuff done on British television and I can't understand it or I can't follow it. Agatha Christie is pretty complicated. And because of the accents and because of things like that, I have to truly, really pay attention. This version of it was good, and it was, I think, is true to the book. There is some differences in it. For theatrical purposes. And I think in some ways it's Netflix trying to say, hey, if you like this, we'll do another one like it in the way it's written out. But her kind of work can be timeless, like Double Indemnity. And I think this rom-com, if you think of current rom-coms, I think this is up to par with current rom-coms. And younger generations would appreciate looking at this film. I want to mention something. I should have mentioned it early on. You might know, and you might remember because we met him at Macstock, Brian Flanagan Authors. Brian and I are on Chuck Joyner's Mac Voices on Tuesday nights together. And after the show, we sit around and talk a little bit, and Brian held up a copy of The Awful Truth. And he said, I went to the library and got this. And so he's been listening to our previous episodes, and he's like, I wanted to find this movie because you thought so highly of it. So I'll get a chance to talk to Brian. I'll find out if he had he might be listening to, I'm sure he's listening. He's not listening to us live, but I'm sure he's going to listen to this episode, and I hope he's had a chance to see the movie because I think it would fit Brian well too, in the sense of his framework and the way he views life. So,
Well, and I wanted to mention too, when we were talking in the beginning about Irene Dunne, I liked her in the movie My Favorite Wife.
yes, another Cary Grant film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We
That
could
was
do
a
that sometime, but we're going to give some space between
yeah,
us
I
and
know.
Cary Grant and Irene
Yeah, I
Dunne.
know.
But it
Yeah.
is another one of those perfect
Mm-hmm.
collaborations between the two,
Yeah.
and they really
It,
appreciated them. So I went to look for stage plays of this. This actually came from a play from I think the 20s,
oh,
and it was done in 37. I can't speak for the stage plays back from the 20s and then its revival and such. But there was one that I read a review of the review was in the New York Times in 2015. And it said it was based on some of the versions of this. Probably the best known version is the movie that we looked at, the 37 version with Cary Grant and Irene Dunne. This movie or this stage play takes more of the turn of the century view of the play, which is
mm,
more of the drama between men and women being seen as possessions of men. And it kind of
mm,
raises that piece in contemporary times in 2015. So I didn't sound like a really funny stage play, but
mm,
it sounded like it was going back to some of the original source stuff around men and women in relationships and the concept of possession back
mm.
in the turn of the century.
I meant to ask you too in the beginning, who was the attorney in the movie? There's
Ooh.
just that small scene where she called the attorney. I wanted to talk about that
Oh
because I
God,
thought that was
that
I
scene I
love that
thought was
scene.
hilarious.
I
I mean,
love that.
it was abusive, but it's like, I'm an attorney. I'm here to help you out. Will you please shut up? To his wife.
Yes, his
It's like,
wife. His
Your
wife
dinner's
kept
getting
coming in and
cold.
saying, yeah, she's like, why do they have to call you during dinner? Your dinner's getting cold. And he said, you just, first he said, be quiet. And she kind of went, she kind of bristled. And then he got back on the phone. He said, now, Lucy, darling. He kept calling her Lucy, darling. Marriage is a beautiful thing. And his wife's in the background nagging him, hang up that phone and call them back later. He goes, you shut up. And she just kept going, like, you could tell she's thinking, don't you talk to me that way. And then he could go right back on the phone with her and say, now, Lucy, you're getting yourself all wound up. Marriage is a beautiful thing. And in the next second, he'd turn around and tell his wife to shut up.
And it
I
got
love that
worse.
scene.
And
It
it's
got
sort of like,
worse.
it
Yeah.
was like no one's taking cues from each other on that.
That was
I'm running through
funny.
the
But I don't
credits
know who
right
he
now.
was.
I'm running through the credits right now, and I'm seeing like nothing that signifies the family's. Oh, Jerry's attorney, Mitchell
Yeah.
Harris,
Okay.
1882 to 1948.
Oh.
He was in the Seawolf, um, Holiday, The Awful Truth. Yeah, pretty much after the next movie after The Awful Truth was 1938 Holiday,
Okay.
and Cary Grant was in that film, and Katharine Hepburn.
Hmm.
It's a young man in love with a girl with a rich family finds an unorthodox plan to go on a holiday for early years of his life. Met with skepticism, except by his fiance's eccentric system and long-suffering brother, and he's in that film. He plays a role in that film. Directed by George Cukor.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching Rich and Famous last night, which was George Cukor's last film. George Cukor, you might know, was known for directing women
Mm-hmm.
and doing films about women. I watched Rich
Mm-hmm.
and Famous with Candice Bergen and Jacqueline Bisset last night. God, what a horrible movie!
Really?
Yeah, I watched like the last third of it, and I'm like,
Oh.
it's like watching The Housewives, but an
Oh,
extended
wow.
version.
Oh,
I thought
yeah.
so. It was,
Okay.
it
I
was
like
not my
Candace
cup of tea.
Bergen.
But it was last. It was the last movie of George Cukor.
Mm.
So yeah, he did Holiday in 1938 with Hepburn and Grant, and with the actor who played the attorney Mitchell Harris.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that scene because I thought it was a very short scene, but I just thought it was hysterical. And as you said, the interaction between his wife and him, and then him talking to her on the phone. And she kept saying, "Oh, but marriage is a beautiful thing." And then he'd turn around and, talk that way to his wife.
Do you have any more trivia? I tried to find locations. The locations we're talking about
All
two,
on the studio.
uh,
Yeah.
two uh, state, um, two state forest preserves, and all I can think of that's
Mhm.
the maybe the cabin where they were at, but there's not much that really predicts any other types of locations. Any more trivia before we go to favorite lines? There are a couple scenes that I don't know if I would call it my favorite scene, but it's the scene people remember from the movie, which is
Okay.
Gone with the or My Dreams Have Gone with the Wind, and also
Mm-hmm.
the replication of that by Irene Dunne and done in sort of parody and
Mm-hmm.
satire. And then the memorable scene of the clock and the symbolism of the clock, and that's done the way it's done. I've already mentioned one of my favorite lines in there, which Irene Dunne says, "Do you want a drink?" Yeah, I'll take a drink. I've already had three or four, but they're beginning to wear out. There are so many great lines in this film. If you go to IMDb, you'll see a lot of them because there are all these one-line quips, that happen.
Everywhere. Mm-hmm.
I will say a couple of them that I haven't said before, and they both came from Aunt Patsy. When Cary Grant's being chased, or is chasing I think the music teacher, and he runs into the room and runs past them, Aunt Patsy points down and said they missed second. Or they didn't touch second. They didn't touch second.
You forgot to touch second.
Yeah, and she didn't say much. She had great lines. She had a lot of laugh lines in this film. And then the other one was when Ralph Bellamy is talking about how, well, I sure learned a lot about women from you. And she's holding the note that Irene Dunne was going to give, that Patsy was going to give Ralph Bellamy to say it's all over. And she gives it to him and said, here's your diploma.
Diploma. You and I think a lot alike on that, Marty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other things? Those were great lines. But like you said, there were so many one-liners. I started to write some of them down. I thought, this is just too many.
Yeah.
Even in the very beginning at the nightclub scene, they were talking about moving to Oklahoma, and Cary Grant said, oh, no more living in New York City. He said, yeah, I know. It's all right for a visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. So they would, it was this line that everybody knows, and he would just say that. It was too many.
You mentioned if you get bored in Oklahoma City, you can always go to Tulsa for the weekend.
Go to Tulsa, yeah. Go to Tulsa for the weekend.
So what movie are we doing next time?
We're doing Dial M for Murder. We're back to murder again.
Yep.
This time it's Grace Kelly.
Alfred Hitchcock, Grace Kelly, Ray Milland, Robert Cummings, 1954 Dial M for Murder. And we'll have that heading in for probably in a week or so. You'll be able to pick that episode up. It's been a while since I've seen this film. The more I see Grace Kelly, I obviously you two kind of went through the generation where she had died, with a bad accident and such. I never quite understood the mystique of her until I started watching some of her movies. To Catch a Thief, Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and it's like wonderful. I mean, she was just wonderful. And so I haven't seen this movie in a while. So I'll take another look at it. Although, I'm a big Hitchcock fan. So we'll take a look at Dial M for Murder in our next episode from 1954, directed by Alfred Hitchcock.
I would just say you have to pay a lot of attention to the keys in this movie.
Yeah. If someone is going to watch along with this film, watch where the keys go, watch where the keys don't go. So thanks, Cindy. And it's great. Thanks for listening to Fade to Chat Golden Age Cinema. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our episodes, take a look at them. Please subscribe, leave a review, share the show with others. That kind of motivates us to keep doing this and finding time to move this process. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@fade-to-chat. That's our YouTube channel. We're also part of the Pod Talk network, so you can find information about the show and other shows that we produce at thepodtalk.net. We'd love to hear from you. Send your thoughts on film suggestions or the films that you would like to see us do to the email thepodtalknetwork@gmail.com. Join us next time for Dial M for Murder as we both continue exploring Hollywood's golden age, one unforgettable classic at a